I had just moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of Cincinnati. It wasn't anything fancy, just a one-bedroom unit on the third floor of an old building. The walls were yellowed, the floorboards creaked when I walked, and the elevator made a loud grinding noise every time it stopped. But it was cheap, and I was desperate. I had recently broken up with my long-term girlfriend, and we used to live together. So this was my fresh start. Just me and a few pieces of second-hand furniture I got off Craigslist. I was honestly looking forward to the quiet. The first couple of days went by without anything strange. I unpacked, cleaned the place top to bottom, set up my TV and Wi-Fi, and started adjusting to my new surroundings. The neighbors kept to themselves. I barely saw anyone in the hallway. The walls were thin, though, so I could sometimes hear muffled conversations, the clink of dishes, or the faint buzz of someone playing video games late into the night. But on the fourth night, something happened that unsettled me. It was around 3 a.m. I had been up late watching a movie on my laptop, and as I got into bed, I heard what sounded like scratching. Very faint. Coming from the wall behind my bed, the wall that connected to the hallway closet. It sounded like something small. Maybe a rat. Maybe just the building settling. I tried to ignore it, but the sound continued for over an hour. Scratching, then tapping, then silence. The next morning, I checked the closet. Nothing out of place. No signs of mice. No damage to the wall or anything. I shrugged it off and went to work. That night, I came home, made dinner, and sat on the couch watching TV. Around midnight, I heard it again. This time louder. Not scratching now, knocking. One slow knock every few seconds, coming from the inside of the closet. I froze. It wasn't like someone was knocking on the outside door. It was coming from inside the apartment, from the closet itself. I didn't move. I muted the TV and just sat there, listening. Knock, knock, knock. I got up slowly and walked toward the closet door. My heart was pounding in my chest. I put my ear against the door. Silence. I opened the closet. Nothing. No one. Just my coat, some shoes, and a few boxes. I turned on the light inside the closet and looked closer. The back wall had a vent, an old square one with rusted metal bars. It didn't look like it had been opened in years, but the knocking had clearly come from that direction. I stared at it for a long time, waiting to hear anything else. But there was nothing. Eventually, I closed the closet and went back to bed. I didn't sleep well that night. Over the next week, things got worse. I started hearing whispering. At first, I thought it was my neighbors, but the voice didn't sound like it was coming from next door. It sounded closer, like it was inside the walls. Sometimes it would be a woman's voice. Other times, a low male whisper. I could never make out what they were saying, but the tone was always the same, urgent, fast, like someone whispering in a panic. I recorded it once on my phone, but the audio just picked up white noise. One night, I woke up to find my closet door wide open. I always closed it before bed, always. But when I woke up, it was open, and the light was on. I stood there staring at it from my bed. I didn't even want to get up. I thought about calling someone, but who would I call? The police? For a light turning on? Eventually, I forced myself to get up and shut the door. I even pushed a chair in front of it that night, just in case. A few days later, I bumped into my neighbor, an older woman who lived directly below me. I asked her if she had ever noticed strange sounds or anything weird in the building. She looked uncomfortable. "You're in 3B, right?" I nodded. She hesitated, then said, "There used to be a guy who lived in that unit. Young, around your age, kept to himself. He went missing last year." "Missing?" I asked. She nodded again. "Police came, never found anything. No signs of a break-in, no forced entry. He just disappeared one night, left everything behind, even his shoes." That shook me. I asked her if he ever mentioned anything strange about the apartment. She gave me a tight smile. "He used to complain about noises, said someone was in the walls." I didn't know what to say. My heart was racing. I thanked her and went back upstairs. That night, I barely slept. kept the lights on. Closet locked, chair in front of it again. Around 2 a.m., I heard the whispers again. This time they were louder, faster. I got up and pressed my ear to the closet wall, and for the first time, I could make out a word. Help. It was so clear, so close. A man's voice, desperate. I grabbed my phone and called the landlord, woke him up, told him I needed someone to check the walls. He said he'd be there in the morning. When he arrived, I showed him everything. The vent, the sounds, the open door. He looked at me like I was imagining it all, but finally agreed to bring in a maintenance guy to open the wall and check. They came back 2 days later. When they opened the closet wall, what they found made both of them back away, instantly. There was a narrow crawl space between the walls. It extended the full length of the apartment, and inside it was a mattress, a backpack, a knife, empty food containers, and photos. Photos of me. Photos taken through the vents. Photos of me sleeping, eating, using my laptop. There was even a picture of me brushing my teeth, taken from behind. I felt sick. The maintenance guy said the space was likely meant for electrical wiring or ventilation, but somehow someone had been living in there, watching me. The police were called. They took the photos, the mattress, and everything else. They never found the person. I moved out that week. I didn't even take most of my stuff. I just packed a bag and left. I couldn't stay in a place where I knew someone had been living inches away from me, watching my every move, whispering through the walls. To this day, I check every closet and every vent in every apartment I stay in. I don't think I'll ever feel truly safe again. And sometimes when I'm alone in a room and everything is quiet, I swear I can still hear it. That whisper. Help. I used to live in a mid-sized apartment complex just outside Phoenix. I was 24 at the time and had just gotten a new job. The place wasn't glamorous. Plain white walls, thin doors, noisy plumbing. But it was cheap and only 10 minutes from the office. The building had 3 floors. I lived on the second, in Unit 205. Across the hall was Unit 206, which stayed empty for the first few months I was there. I liked that. No noisy neighbors across from me, no weird smells coming through the door cracks, and no one to awkwardly pass by every morning. But then one day in late March, I came home from work and noticed the door to 206 slightly cracked open. I remember it clearly because it hadn't been opened in months, and the complex had a rule about keeping unit doors shut unless they were being shown. The hallway was quiet, but I could hear something faint inside the unit. It sounded like humming, just a soft, rhythmic tune, like a lullaby. I paused for a second, curious, but didn't want to be creepy. So I just went inside and locked my door. Later that night, around 1 a.m., I woke up to something that made me sit straight up in bed. Someone was knocking on my front door. Not loud, not urgent, just 3 soft, slow knocks. I sat there in the dark, trying to decide if I should check it. Maybe someone needed help. Maybe it was a drunk neighbor. Or maybe someone was just at the wrong door. But something felt off. I got up, tiptoed to the peephole, and looked out. No one was there. The hallway was empty. I stood there for at least 30 seconds, just staring, then slowly turned the lock and opened the door an inch. Still no one. I closed it, locked it again, and went back to bed feeling uneasy. The next morning, I left for work and glanced at Unit 206. The door was now completely shut, but something new caught my eye. There were strange symbols drawn on the door in black marker. Circles, X's, a strange triangle with a line through it. I figured it was a kid messing around, or maybe someone with mental issues. Either way, I didn't want to get involved. Over the next few nights, I kept hearing things. Knocks, whispering, the humming again, always soft, always at strange hours. One night I came home late and found something on my doormat. A photo. It was a picture of me, taken from the side, through my living room window. I felt sick. I looked around, but the hallway was empty. I immediately called the front desk and told them someone had left a disturbing photo at my door. They said they'd review the hallway cameras and get back to me. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I got a call from the front office. They told me something strange. "Sir, we checked the security footage from last night. We see someone placing the photo at your door around 2:17 a.m., but the quality is bad. Their face is blurry the whole time. They're just standing there, and they seem to be smiling the entire time." "Do you know who it was?" I asked. There was a pause. "We think it might be the new tenant in 206, but we're not sure." That was the first time I heard for sure that someone lived there. I asked them to do a welfare check, or at least let me know who it was. They said they'd send someone up. Hours passed. Then I heard a knock at my door again. I checked the peephole, and it was the property manager. She looked pale, nervous. She apologized and said they'd gone to check on 206, but when they knocked, the person inside didn't answer. After a few minutes, they used the spare key. When they entered, the unit was completely empty. No furniture, no lights on, no signs of anyone ever having moved in. Except one thing. In the center of the living room was a single old rocking chair, facing the wall. And behind that chair, dozens of photos. All of me, taped to the wall like some kind of obsession. Pictures of me walking to my car, eating, watching TV. There were even Polaroids from inside my apartment. Ones I never took, ones I couldn't explain. "How did they get in?" I asked. The manager shook her head. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken locks, nothing. They called the police. An investigation was opened. They checked my unit for hidden cameras. None were found. They fingerprinted the apartment. Nothing came up. The police said they'd look into it, but weeks passed, and I never got an update. Eventually, I packed my things and moved out. I broke my lease and paid the fee. I didn't care. I felt watched every second I was in that place. The day I left, I passed by Unit 2061 last time. The door was wide open. I looked inside. Nothing. Just an empty chair, rocking slowly, like someone had just gotten up from it. I turned and left without looking back. To this day, I still wonder who was watching me, and how long they had been inside. Sometimes I still get the feeling someone's behind me when I walk into my apartment. Sometimes I still hear humming at night. Back in 2019, I had just landed a remote job and decided to move closer to my mom, who lived in a small town in Oregon. I found a decent one-bedroom apartment above a quiet thrift store. The rent was surprisingly cheap for the area, and the place seemed clean and peaceful. The landlord, a short guy in his 50s named Ron, said the previous tenant had left in a hurry, but he didn't elaborate. The apartment had a weird layout. When you walked in, the kitchen was to your right, the bathroom down a short hallway, and the bedroom was tucked into the far corner with a single window that faced the alley behind the building. It was small, but cozy enough. The first couple weeks were normal. I spent most of my time on my computer, working or watching Netflix. I rarely saw anyone around. But then I started noticing something strange. It began with small things. I'd leave a glass on the kitchen counter, come back an hour later, and find it moved to the table. Or I'd leave my phone charging in the living room and find it unplugged in the bedroom. At first, I thought I was just forgetful. Living alone can mess with your head sometimes. But it kept happening, almost every day. Something small, something moved, something slightly off. Then one night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps. Not from above or beside. No one lived in the units next to me. But from inside my apartment. I froze in bed. I didn't move, didn't even breathe loudly. The steps came from the kitchen, moved past the bathroom, and stopped right outside my bedroom door. I stared at the door, heart racing, waiting to hear something. Then, the doorknob moved. Just a slow rattle, like someone testing it. I sat up, grabbed the small bat I kept by the bed, and waited. but after a few seconds the sound stopped. I turned on the lights, checked every inch of the apartment. Nothing. The front door was still locked. The windows were shut. No sign of anyone. I barely slept the rest of the night. The next day, I told my landlord. He said it was probably just the building settling, or maybe a raccoon on the roof. I didn't buy it, but I had no proof. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been in there. A few nights later, it got worse. I was watching a movie on my laptop in bed when I heard something fall in the kitchen. A loud thud, like a pan dropping. I paused the movie, got up, and walked out slowly. The lights were off, so I flipped the switch on. Everything looked normal, until I saw the cabinet under the sink. It was open. I never leave that open. Inside, all my cleaning supplies had been pulled out and stacked in a neat little pile. On top of the pile was a photo, a printed-out photo, of me, sitting at my desk, wearing the same clothes I was wearing now. The picture had been taken from behind. I stood there frozen. My skin felt like it was crawling. I looked behind me, out the window, every corner. No one. I grabbed the photo, went back to my room, and locked the door. That night, I barely moved. I kept the bat in my hand until the sun came up. In the morning, I called the police. They came, looked around, asked questions. They were polite but didn't seem to take it seriously. There was no sign of forced entry, no fingerprints on the photo. They filed a report and left. That was it. I knew I had to figure this out myself. I went online and ordered 2 motion-detecting cameras. One for the kitchen, one for the living room. I set them up, synced them to my phone, and waited. For the next 3 days, nothing happened. No weird noises, no movement. I started thinking maybe the police showing up had scared whoever it was away. Then on the 4th night, my phone pinged at 3:12 a.m. Motion detected. Kitchen camera. I opened the app and froze. The footage showed a man, not a burglar, not a neighbor. He was tall with messy dark hair, wearing nothing but dirt-stained jeans. His skin looked pale, too pale, and he moved slowly like his joints were stiff. He walked into the kitchen from the hallway, barefoot, and stood in front of the fridge, just staring for nearly 10 minutes. Then he turned, walked to the living room, and disappeared behind the wall that held the bookshelf. But here's the thing. That wall doesn't lead anywhere. There's no door, no closet, just a solid wall. The next morning, I moved the shelf and tapped on the wall behind it. It sounded hollow. I started feeling around the edges and found something strange. A tiny, almost invisible seam along the corner. I pressed it, and with a little force, a hidden panel popped open. Behind it was a narrow passageway, pitch black, dusty. It smelled like mold and rot. I grabbed a flashlight and looked inside. The passage was barely wide enough for someone to crawl through. I followed it a few feet until it curved left and opened up into a tiny secret room. It was no bigger than a closet. Inside was a thin, stained mattress, a stack of old fast food wrappers, a rusty knife, and a pile of photos. Dozens of them, all of me, eating, sleeping, showering. Photos I never knew were taken. There was also a journal. Most of the pages were smeared with something dark, maybe dirt, maybe dried blood. But the parts I could read were horrifying. He sleeps so peacefully, like a doll. I want to be closer. Tonight, I will stand over him and breathe him in. I backed out of the tunnel, sealed it shut, and nailed the panel back in place. Then I called the police again. This time, they took it seriously. They found fingerprints, DNA samples, and even matched the guy's photo from the footage to a missing persons report. Turns out he used to live in the building years ago. Went off the grid after being evicted. No one knew what happened to him. They never caught him. The theory was that he had been living in the walls, slipping into my apartment while I was out or sleeping, watching me, following me. I moved out the next day. Now every place I move into, I knock on the walls. I check for loose panels. I keep cameras in every room. And still, some nights, when I wake up in the dark, I swear I can hear breathing that isn't mine.